All right, guys, we are back with the next video for our human origins notes. We're going to talk about the final three species that we talked about in class or that you researched a couple weeks ago. So if you are watching this first, you are halfway through, you should go back and watch the other video. So this is Homo erectus. This is one of our most direct ancestors. Uh, this is the species that we've actually essentially have evolved from. This is a direct ancestor from us, and you can see a lot more human-like characteristics for Homo erectus than, say, even Homo habilis before then. Much more human-like characteristics. Still smaller brain, more in terms of the size of the skull. Still smaller brain, but getting there, right? Starting to get closer to us. A couple of things about Homo erectus. Homo erectus walked more efficiently than us, right? Homo erectus also, means upright man. Means upright man. And one of the things that's usually confusing for a lot of people, like how does that work? Remember that evolution rewards things that are more efficient, but not necessarily is always the case, right? Some things just might be an accident of genetics. But Homo erectus, as they walked, what that means is they actually burned fewer calories per step. That right, it took them fewer calories to step than a human does, which allowed them to walk farther on fewer calories of food. That is just something that over time we no longer had. It was no longer as advantageous, I guess. Um, Also, a lot larger brain compared to the other species, and enough so that we actually think that they had some primitive language. There's issues with the location of their larynx, so probably full complex human speech was not present, but probably close enough with some pointing and grunts and gestures and those kinds of things. The biggest thing for Homo erectus is that they are the first hominid species to leave Africa. This is a big, big deal. So our ancestral home is the continent of Africa, and Homo erectus is the first species that we see leave the friendly confines of that continent and spread out all over the world, or at least to Europe and Asia. Um, this is really, really important because once you see this expansion from Homo erectus, you see regional differences start to show up. You see what we would now call variations that will eventually become different species of humans that not humans in genus, not Homo sapiens, um, and that leads to, even in a short amount of time, you see these regional differences in the Homo erectus fossil record. Um, that's really remarkable, right? As they adapt to their new environments, they become different, right? Just this is evolution taking place. And because they left Africa, you can see that they were on the planet for 1.5 million years. That is significantly longer than any of the other species that we've talked about before or since. Um, so it's not necessarily that unheard of to think of Homo erectus as, maybe even the baseline human species before us because they were on the planet for so long, right? Significantly longer than we've been, right? Almost 10 times as long as we've been on the planet. Um, so that's Homo erectus. From Homo erectus, you see a branch of Homo erectus individuals that were located mostly in Europe, and those are the Neanderthals or Homo neanderthalis, if you will. Homo Neanderthal or Neanderthals, actually, it's Neanderthals because it's German. These were the fossils found in a cave. These are our closest extinct human species that was first discovered in the early 1800s. Most of the Neanderthals were located in northern Europe, which was actually during an ice age. which required them to invent things like clothing and shelters and things to protect them from the environments. We like to think of Neanderthals as like the prototypical caveman, right? Kind of strong and dumb and whatever. That's actually not entirely true. Um, Also, there was really no such thing as cavemen. We found Neanderthals fossils in caves, but there weren't people that like lived in caves all the time, or humans that lived in caves like that. Like that cartoon that you have of caveman is not accurate really in any way. So, since Neanderthals were in the colder climates in Europe, especially during an ice age, their diets had to adapt to less plants and vegetables. So they had to switch mostly to a more meat-based diet, which meant that they were a little bit stronger than Homo sapiens. Um, and we know that they were constantly, big game hunters taking down mastodons and woolly mammoths and stuff, based off of most of the fossils that we have show bone fractures. So these bones would have broken and then healed, and that shows that they were in contact with these large animals that would have been enough to cause them injury. They did a lot of things that modern humans do, controlling fire, made clothes. And I want you to think about, this is going to be a discussion question. What does it mean that they had if they're burying their dead and including symbols? So think about that. What does it mean that Neanderthals must have had, an example of that modern humans have, that is shown by the fact that they buried their dead and included symbols in the burial plots? The last thing that I think is important here for the Neanderthals is the fact that while the Ape to Man video was correct, that humans outcompeted Neanderthals in some regards, more of the evidence lately that's come out has been that Neanderthals and humans actually interbred, that they were close enough ancestors that uh, that a Homo sapien and a Neanderthal could produce um, viable offspring that survived. And there just happened to be more Homo sapiens than Neanderthals in the region. So, as a half, let's say, half Homo sapien, half Neanderthal child, when they go to have kids, they were more likely to have kids with another Homo sapien than with another Neanderthal, just based off of numbers alone. There were just more Homo sapiens. So that meant that the Neanderthal line slowly died out. It wasn't necessarily like a one-time thing, that there was this big war between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals and blah, blah, blah. I mean, part of that is true, but really the true history is the fact of that there was this interbreeding between Neanderthals and humans. In fact, if you have any European ancestry, particularly Northern European ancestry, so that's British, French, German, Scandinavian, you probably have Neanderthal DNA. I did a 23andMe. My family is mostly from Ireland and Germany area. Um, I have like I have more Neanderthal DNA than the average person. Um, that doesn't really affect me in any way. It just means that, thousands and thousands of years ago, my ancestors were part Neanderthal, part Homo sapien. And that's true probably of any of you if you are, again, of Northern European ancestry. And you can see how close these guys are in terms of skull shape and size, right? They look fairly human. I always make a joke. I think that the Neanderthal image here kind of looks like Vin Diesel, and I think the modern man one kind of looks like handsome Squidward. Um, I think that's I don't know what that means, but I just think that that's who they kind of remind me of. So. Again, I don't really know what that means, but you can see that just the shape of the skull, right? Even though Neanderthals were bigger and stronger than modern humans, just the shape of the skull meant that humans, Homo sapiens, had more developed prefrontal cortex, which is what allows for planning, decision making, um, those types of skills, which were much easier for Homo sapiens than for Neanderthals. and that led to one of the reasons why Homo sapiens were more successful. So let's talk about us. Let's talk about us, and we'll talk about us by focusing on Cro-Magnon. So Cro-Magnon are Homo sapiens. They are the first Homo sapien fossils that we found. So there are fossilized remains that are Homo sapien. Cro-Magnon fossils were found around 30,000 years ago in the region of France. Um, that's where they get the name. We know a couple of things about these individuals. We know that Homo sapiens, again, around 40,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, made jewelry. We were ornamenting based off of whether it's animal bones or teeth or tusks or other feathers. Right, we were creating jewelry, art, if you will. There are very famous cave paintings of hands, which were created by around the same time. So there's this artistic drive that Homo sapiens had that we don't really see in any of the other early human species. There's even some evidence that there was some musical instruments, some elephant tusks that were hollowed out and played like a flute. That's pretty. I think that's really interesting, right? So there's something unique about Homo sapiens and creativity, which is probably an evolutionary advantage. We know that on the grave sites that there was tend to be family graves. At least that's what we think. We also know that they were foragers, that they didn't farm yet, that they kind of went around wherever the food supply was. Which, actually, believe it or not, some of the evidence suggests that that was a better way of life for us. While food was a little bit more scarce, it actually allowed for a little bit more downtime and some time for culture and dancing. And I think that that's why you see this rise of art around the same time that Cro-Magnon fossils start to get found. And then I really like that last sentence there. Is a little confusing, but I think it's still important to kind of highlight. Um, while Cro-Magnon are Homo sapiens, and while Homo sapiens are us, there have been a lot of changes to us, both genetically and non-genetically, over the last 30,000 years. Obviously, things like the internet and other cultural advances are important, but even things like the way that we use tools, our structures of society, our ability to digest certain foods, things like being lactose intolerant is something that most humans have been for our history. It's only a relatively recent adaptation that allows humans to digest cow's milk, which is kind of weird if you think about it. Like, what are we doing drinking cow's milk? Like, milk is for babies. What? Anyway, um, don't try to think about like what the first guy to drink milk was thinking when he was watching the. Sorry, tangents. Straight to the facts. So there have been significant changes over those 30,000 years that make us different from them, if that makes sense. So they are Homo sapiens, we are Homo sapiens, but the process of natural selection, the process of evolution is still continuing. We are adapting to our environments and looking very different than they would have. So that's it. That's our series of notes here. So make sure that you are answering the discussion question that I mentioned about Neanderthals, and please make sure that you come to class next time I see you with questions that you have regarding these early species. All right, guys, take care. See you later.